Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bruin Dash, the UCLA football show on Dash Sports TV. My name is Sam Connon, one of your hosts once again, and I am joined again by Jack Perez. Jack, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Sam. Lovely to be here with you as always.
Can't wait. It's going to be another great show. UCLA football back to practice late last week. We've been hearing from them the last couple of days, getting some insight into how things are progressing. So we'll be talking about that, the beginning of their real preseason finally, with the kickoff about 4 weeks away. And then the UCLA defense, getting a little bit insight into that. We haven't talked about it too much on this show, but it's going to be integral if UCLA has any chance of winning any games this season. So Jack and I will be breaking that down. And then we will also be talking about our wish lists for UCLA football in 2020. Jack wrote a column about it for Sports Pac-12, and we'll both be sharing our wish lists for the team this season. So if you want to join in on the conversation, feel free, if you're watching live, to leave something in the chat. We'll respond. We'll talk it out. So we'll get things starting with the beginning of practice, Jack. So UCLA started practice on Friday, November 7th kickoff. We've been hearing from Chip Kelly, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. What has stood out to you so far in these interviews?
I think the positivity coming from every single person in the organization has been great. You know, as most teams are wont to do, they like to seem positive. Even if things aren't going too well in practice, they want to come out to the media and seem positive. But it seems like there's a real, genuine positivity, not just from DTR, but from Chip Kelly, from the defensive players that we've interviewed. They seem like everything's going smoothly, even within a pandemic, even though they know they're not going to be playing with fans there, even though they know they're playing a shortened season, playing at Colorado week 1, Utah, Oregon, 2 consecutive Fridays. They all seem to be having a positive vibe around them. What's the biggest thing you've gotten, Sam, other than the positive vibe?
Well, beyond just the general positive vibe, which is understandable, these guys are finally back on the field with their teammates after months and months of kind of missing out on that. I think the one quote that has stood out to me so far these last 4 days was Dorian Thompson-Robinson Friday morning saying that Chip Kelly has kind of given him and the rest of the playmakers, the running backs, receivers, tight ends, the keys to the offense. And I know that's a topic that people have been talking about for 2 years, that either Chip Kelly's running a simplified offense or he's kind of waiting for his players to develop before they kind of have the improvisation that Kelly allowed at Oregon or even in Philadelphia with the Eagles. And I think it's really promising that it seems like we're going to get some of that. And maybe it's maybe just a little bit of lip service. Maybe it's not 100% in Dorian Thompson-Robinson's hands. But if he can run the offense smoother and faster and make better decisions pre-snap, then I think it's going to be really interesting to see what this offense morphs into with DTR at the helm, Chip Kelly calling plays on the sidelines, and even with Justin Fry going into his second year as offensive coordinator.
Yeah, not only did DTR talk about getting the keys to the offense, he also talked a lot about how he was viewed as a leader of this team, how a lot of the older guys on the team were viewed as the captains, as the guys that are going to push them through this, because this is going to be a pretty young team across the board, but you've got guys like DTR that is entering his 3rd year, Demetric Felton coming into his 5th year as a redshirt senior. You know, you've got transfer in Brenton Brown. You've still got guys there. Now, unfortunately, some guys have transferred out or possibly going to be opting not to play this season. But with a lot of young guys coming in and a team maybe not really prepared, especially after not having a spring practice, after not having the summer that they wanted to, and kind of getting thrown back into it when the Pac-12 revealed their schedule, it's going to take a lot of leadership to pull them through. And DTR, for as much as I've criticized his quarterback abilities in the past, he does seem like he's really grown into that role, and he seems like he's ready to be a leader for this Bruins team.
Yeah, even looking past DTR, we talked to Osa Odighizuwa and Taimanoa over the weekend. Lenny Teloa is back. Bo Calvert's here for his 3rd year. The guys we've talked to. There's a lot of, maybe we don't look at them as veterans just because of playing time, but in terms of being their 3rd, 4th, 5th year in college, there is a decent amount of experience on this team compared to what we've had the last 2 years. So it's interesting because the defensive line is primarily upperclassmen. The secondary is primarily upperclassmen. Receivers, running backs, a quarterback too with DTR, third year. You have a lot of experience, but it stood out to me where the inexperience is. And we haven't talked to anyone on the offensive line yet. I think that's going to be really interesting when we get to chat with those guys. If we ever get to talk to Justin Fry, who is the offensive coordinator, but also former O-line coach, and he works primarily with the O-line a lot of the time. So, I mean, you had 2 transfers leave, you had 2 starters, but then it's also Sean Ryan, your best offensive lineman's only a sophomore, which is good for the future, but who knows if he's the anchor on your left side and he's still relatively inexperienced. There are a lot of things up in the air, and I'm looking forward to seeing how these leaders, whether it's Tom Robinson or Felton, work with this offensive line to maybe kind of rush along their development a little bit.
Yeah, I think the offensive line is going to be a big key this season, but I think they'll struggle, especially week 1 and 2. You know, losing Jake Byrne, a guy that's been a consistent starter on that line, it's really going to hurt. Offensive lines are things that are not built in a day and a month. They're really built through going through the fires of games, of going through competitions, of sticking together. DTR had a lot of sacks and some fumbles last year because he came pressured heavily from defenses. That offensive line's got to gel quickly. Unfortunately, we'll see. You know, a loss of a Jake Byrne is huge, and Sean Ryan being only a sophomore now, as good as he was and as good as he can be, that inexperience does really stand out. But when you've got a guy like DTR who is going into his third year, who is expected to make a big leap, as you've said in past shows, they're going to have to rely on him a lot. They're going to have to rely on him to make the plays when, you know, coverage is too tight, the running backs are not able to break through the line. They're going to need DTR to show up with a little bit of magic in his pocket. I think that's going to be the key to a lot of this season for a lot of teams, is having guys that just show up out on random days. You know, you saw KJ Costello in Mississippi State week 1 against LSU. He rode that air raid offense to a huge game. People were talking about him going into the Heisman conversation almost immediately. Now, since then, he's tapered off. That whole team is tapered off. But for a team like UCLA, who getting over 500 would be a huge accomplishment for them this year, guys like DTR can lean on their experience and pull out some moments of magic.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen him do that in the past before, like last year against Washington State, obviously. And even a wire-to-wire victory against Stanford was huge for his confidence and for his progression as a quarterback. But yeah, that offensive line, it's obviously not all on DTR. It's not really his position group, but he's going to have to work closely. I think the guy who's key there is Paul Gratton. He's grad transfer from Villanova. Most of the other guys outside of whether Taylor, Duke Clemens, Antonio Mafia, Al Anderson, don't even have 1 year of starts under their belt, and Gratton's really going to have to key. So if you have Sean Ryan and Paul Gratton holding down the left side of your offensive line, I think that's great news, and that's something you can be comfortable with. But it's going to be really interesting seeing the difference between the left side and the experience there, and maybe the inexperience on the right side. Tony Mafia, who, I mean, he was a defensive lineman. He was a nose tackle up in spring ball this year. So maybe we'll transition into that a little bit, because we talked to Taimano, we talked to Digizua, and that defensive line is really experienced, but no Mafia this year. So there will be a little bit of a dynamic shift. What do you expect of that? Like the difference is with Mafia leaving that position group, and do you think he can contribute anything to the offensive line right away, especially in a shortened season?
I mean, it's going to be tough. These training camp weeks will be pretty vital. I don't know how much we should expect out of him. We honestly shouldn't expect much out of him. You're talking about a guy that should have had a full spring training camp, a full summer of working out with the positional group, coming back in August and working out with them, getting a few tune-up games. We don't know if UCLA would have beaten San Diego State, if they would have been Hawaii, but at least those were games before the conference where he could have had the chance to prove himself and work against teams that maybe wouldn't have been as experienced, maybe don't have the same talent Pac-12 teams have, especially before Oregon. Oregon's supposed to be a heavy favorite in the Pac-12. A USC in the Week 6 game. We shouldn't expect too much out of these guys. I think a lot of UCLA fans sometimes put a little bit too much pressure on their guys to be great right away. We're not a USC or Oregon right now. We have to build our way up to that. And a position switch is one of the toughest things to do in football. And we shouldn't just put too much pressure on this guy right away. Now, if he comes in as a great offensive lineman, that's perfect. That's amazing. Chip Kelly will take that every day of the week. But fans need to be realistic and understand that switching positions like that, especially to the offensive line, is going to be tough. Give him a couple weeks to work his way in there.
Yeah, it's not something like moving from outside linebacker to defensive end, like putting on weight and maybe changing a few moves. It's a totally different ball game. Obviously, we saw Bostag low into it. He moved from the defensive line to be the center for UCLA. He started the last 2 seasons, every game at center, and it worked really well his junior year and then kind of tapered off his senior year. So I think we're probably going to see a bit of a different, basically the opposite path for Mafi, who, because he didn't get that time in spring ball or too much time over the summer in organized practice, I don't think he'll be a full-time starter. Maybe he'll get 50% of the snaps or something. But I think this year for him is really about building for next year. And if you have all these inexperienced younger guys take this development year, I think that the UCLA offensive line in 2021 would be something really special, even if it hadn't gone. But we'll take that and move on to talking about the UCLA defense. Has not been a positive for the past couple of years. There's definitely been some holes on that side of the ball, even though there were some talented players like Darnay Holmes, or even Jalen Phillips a few years back, who have been on the roster. But UCLA had the worst pass defense in its history last season, and it was worse in the Pac-12, worst Pac-12 pass defense in 5-6 years. It hasn't been pretty. Jack, are there any different expectancies here, and what could possibly take them over the hump and turn them into at least a mediocre defense?
I mean, it's going to be tough for them. Losing Chris Barnes, losing some of the Darnay Holmes, losing some of those guys on your defense is going to be tough to replace. And with the shortened training camp, with the shortened season, they shouldn't be expected to come out of the gates right away. But on the other hand, the offenses that they are facing, while some of them are supposed to be good, USC is supposed to be good, Arizona State, Arizona, Oregon especially might be a tough challenge. They will have to come out strong, especially week 1 against Colorado with new quarterback. Week 2 against Utah on a Friday at home. You cannot give up big points against those teams. You can't rely on DTR in the offense. While good and while they have the ability to put up huge points, you can't rely on them to win every game like a Washington State game. Giving up 63 points ever is a bad thing. You shouldn't be giving up 63 points. We saw against Oregon State last year, giving up plus 30 points. If UCLA is able to keep it below 30 points a game, and I don't know, they seem like they give 1 million passing yards every single time, even though they had guys in the secondary that were talented. It just seemed like something wasn't clicking with them. It seemed like sometimes the rotations were off. Sometimes their coverage plans were messed up. If they can hold some of these offenses, especially ones that are less experienced, to under 250 passing yards a game, even under 200, which is a tall order, but if they can hold them to that, UCLA should be coming out on top. Can they do it? Yes, I think they can. I think that this group, with the lack of preparation from other teams, should be able to take a big step forward.
Yeah, and you lose Darnay Holmes, that's tough, but he's really the only major contributor who's out of that secondary. You still have Quentin Lake. You have Rashad Williams, who I think is going to be a really good piece as maybe not a lockdown corner, but he's someone who I think can take a big step as a number 1 corner in the Pac-12. And I mean, just the new guys you add, you have Jake Newman, you have Jonathan Vaughns, who's a linebacker and safety. You have Carl Jones, who can play linebacker and safety. Obi Ebo, coming from Stanford, is a grad transfer. So you have new names, new faces. You have youth. You have experience. I think it's an interesting blend, but it really, I think, comes down to, and I don't want to oversimplify things, the defensive line. A part of shutting down the pass is pass rush. And if you can't get to the quarterback, then you can't expect your secondary to cover guys for 10 full seconds. So you have an experienced defensive line. Ozuna has got better every year he's played at UCLA. He's going for NFL draft stock this year. He's really trying to get his first winning season. And I think he's really going to be key in not only stuffing the run like he has in the past, but he has to take that next step in getting to the quarterback. 3.5 sacks is good, but he's going to have to take that next step.
Right, and you see some of the talented quarterbacks they have in the Pac-12 South. You've got Jaden Daniels, you've got Keaton Slovis, you've got Bentley now transfers from South Carolina to Utah. You're not. Some of these guys are. Well, Daniels and Slovis are just going to be entering their second years. Bentley's a transfer. They're not. They shouldn't be at the level where UCLA shouldn't be able to handle them. And it does start at the defensive line. You've got to win the battle in the trenches. If you don't put pressure on these guys, they have talented receivers and they've got talented running backs that can get open and they can catch the ball and they can gain a lot of yards. And we've seen that at UCLA the past few years. We've seen them give up big chunks of yards. They've allowed these dynamic plays. They beat USC 2 years ago, and they were able to hold that team to a rough day. But last season, man, USC just worked their way with the UCLA team. The defense did nothing to stop them. So they're going to have to take a big step up on the defensive line. But I'm looking at the linebackers too. Losing Chris Barnes, he wasn't drafted, but signed as a free agent, and now he's doing super well in the NFL. And UCLA has always had, especially in the last 10 years, this history of really good linebackers, Barr, Jack, Kendricks. It's up to them to really step up, take a defensive leadership on this team, and show that UCLA is back. Because while I've said the offense is great, the offense could do some super, super amazing every single week if they're consistent, as we've seen in like the Washington State game last year. It's up to the defense to hold them and give DTR some breathing room.
Yeah, I mean, the linebackers really just got obliterated in the offseason. You had Josh Woods, Chris Barnes, Keyshawn Lucier-South. You had Lokeni Taloa, all gone. That's tough. But you still have Lenny Taloa there. And other than that, it's a bunch of new faces. It really is. Bo Calvert played the last game of last season, and he showed promise. I think he could be a really good, true, like middle linebacker, classic, like a not as good as Luke Kuechly, obviously, but the kind of stick in the middle and be the quarterback of the defense kind of thing. I think it's really the success of the defense in the run game, in the short pass, covering tight ends and running backs. It's all going to be on Bo Calvert's shoulders, making sure he can call out the right plays really, and make sure that he's really got his head screwed on. It's a lot of pressure for a guy who, even as a junior, hasn't played that much, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can kind of shoulder that load this year.
We got a chat here. It says, why are other Pac-12 schools able to get the defensive talent when UCLA isn't? There's no real excuse for UCLA's recruiting troubles. I mean, you're in the hotbed of LA. SoCal's got a lot of great recruiting talent, but Chip Kelly's never been the greatest recruiter. Even in Oregon, he didn't have the best recruits every single year. But he could elevate those guys to the next level. He can make a 3-star guy look like a 5-star guy on the field with his schemes, especially on the offensive end. Now, even Chip Kelly's Oregon defenses struggled every once in a while. That's the thing. It's not really the talent that's UCLA's problem. It's more the consistency. We've had talent. We had Holmes. We had Barnes. We've got these guys that are able to come out and play really well. But it's just something with the scheme right now. It's up to Chip Kelly to figure out. I know you can blame the defensive coordinator, you can blame all the positional coaches, but it all falls on Chip Kelly's shoulders at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that UCLA doesn't get this type of defensive talent because, like you said, Darnay Holmes was a 5-star, probably the best defensive back in the country in the class of 2017. Jalen Phillips was that same class. He was probably the best pass rusher in that high school class. So it's not like no one ever comes, but Chip Kelly being an offensive-oriented coach and not having a defensive mind next to him who can kind of recruit and coach these players up, I think is something that hurts. I mean, Jerry Azzanaro had Darnay Holmes, who was a 4th-round pick in the NFL, Chris Barnes, who was a undrafted free agent but still good in the NFL, and a lot of good linebackers and a veteran defensive line. And he put together the worst defense in UCLA history, period. Awful across the board. So it's execution, it's coaching, it's play styles, it's priorities. There's a lot of things that go into it. And maybe down the road, I mean, there's Bo Calvert's brother, Ethan Calvert. He's a high 4-star who's looking at UCLA. Maybe he's someone who kind of flips off his USC path and comes to UCLA. I guess we'll wait and see. But it's more than just getting the right talent. It's using it well and kind of developing it well. But I really think, and when it comes to utilizing them and fixing this defense, I think Brian Norwood is the key. He's coming over from Navy. He is an assistant head coach, so he's going to be working very closely with Chip Kelly, but he's really going to be working with the defensive backs. We heard a lot about him from Kelly, from the defensive line, going to kind of a 4-2-5 defensive set, and it's really going to be interesting to see how he kind of tries to butt in and overhaul Jerry Azzanaro's defense.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to do something. You can't let this happen year after year. Your team's not gonna win games without a good defense. You can try to rely on DTR in his arm or Demetric Felton getting 2 return touchdowns, a couple rushing touchdowns, a couple receiving touchdowns a game, but it's just not sustainable.
Yeah, so we got a few weeks left for UCLA to tune up that defense. In the meantime, let's move on to our third and final topic of the day. This one goes along with a column that Jack, you wrote for Sports Pac-12, who Dash Sports TV has a partnership with. Our written content is going up there, and we're having a UCLA column come out every Monday, either written by myself or Jack. This week is the UCLA football wish list for 2020. Jack, I'll let you go first and list off your 3 wishes for this team this year.
All right, thank you so much, Sam. Of course, the first wish has to be going over 500. A 4-3 season would save Chip Kelly's job. He hasn't shown out the first couple of times, 3-9, 4-8 seasons. It's just not going to cut it at UCLA. And UCLA fans are begging for an over 500 season. The last time this team was over 500 was Josh Rosen's first year when they went 8-5. From the Brett Hundley days, they were consistently over 500. It's time to get back to that, even if you're not going to beat a USC, or we're not expecting you to go to the road and win at Oregon, but go 3-3 in conference, and then when that 7th week, when you get that seeded game, get a victory there, or go 4-2 against the Pac-12 South plus Oregon. I mean, realistically, this UCLA team should be able to compete against every single team in the Pac-12 South. Oregon on the road on a Friday, that's a tough matchup. I'll give them that. But you get USC at home, you got Arizona State on the road. That might be a tough one, but Arizona coming in, Utah coming in, Colorado on the road, you've got to be competing in those games. The second one is an improved defense. We've talked about that a lot right now, but even getting to a mediocre status goes a long way in improving everything. You're giving DTR better spots to start the field from if you get a few more turnovers in a game. You get a lot of pressure off of his back. You shouldn't be relying on your offense every single time out, because offense sometimes, they're a little inconsistent. Defense can always show up every single week the same way. And the final one is in that 7th game, that seeded matchup that has not been revealed yet, and the Pac-12 hasn't announced how they're doing it exactly. We need to face Stanford. After breaking that curse, breaking that streak of just loss after loss after loss against Stanford, we finally broke it last year, and we should have the chance to do it again. I know people are going to say, oh, what about the Cal game that's been going on longer? It's another UC school. It's the big brother that we've always kind of fell down to. If USC is the cousin town, Cal is the big brother. But we should get the chance to show Stanford that the curse is over and it's our turn to be the ones on a winning streak. What about you, Sam? What are your 3 wishes for UCLA this year?
I think your 3 are pretty solid. They're kind of within the realm of possibility, but I guess we'll see. Mine, it kind of goes along with your second one. I want to see multiple performances from this defense that show there's some growth, like dominant defensive games. I understand that with a shortened season and a shortened preseason, the defense might not be able to take a leap and go from the bottom of the barrel to the top of the Pac-12 in terms of defensive stats. But you saw what they did against Stanford last year. That was really impressive. That was one really good defensive game, and that's it. I want to see 2 games where the defense wins them the game. The offense can win them games, like you said, whenever. That Washington State game, they made their best effort against USC. They almost had that just because the offense was so good. But that defensive performance against Stanford from last year, I want to see that twice, maybe 3 times this year, to show that there is at least some potential and a high ceiling for this defense moving forward with like this coaching staff. So maybe it means Azenara is gone, but I want to see Brian Norwood's defense show a little potential, so maybe he can take over as defensive coordinator moving forward. My second is about Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I want to see fewer than 1 turnover per game, which in a 7-game season, 6 turnovers across the whole season, that sounds pretty solid just because the season's short. But I mean, that's been a problem for him in the past, and it's cost him a lot of confidence from the fan base and maybe from the coaching staff in terms of play calls. But his ceiling is high. We know he has the talent, and if he can just finish off those drives and really put his team in the best position to win all the time, then I think that really sets up UCLA for a successful season. And third of all, I want to see a bowl. It doesn't even have to be a bowl win. Everyone's technically eligible for a bowl this year, so who knows? Maybe UCLA can go 1-6 and still make a bowl. I don't care. I just want there to be a postseason game played by UCLA football. Jack, you and I are both seniors at UCLA. We've been looking forward to this season for football and men's basketball, for kind of capping things off. And it'd be nice, even if they don't really deserve it, for UCLA to go to a bowl and kind of put themselves out there on a national stage and hopefully show that they aren't the bottom of the barrel in the Pac-12 anymore, and that they are legit on a national stage. And maybe that helps with recruiting. Maybe it helps with marketing or this next apparel deal. But either way, I'd like to see them play in a bowl just for my own personal sake.
I think I'll add to that, Sam. I don't want them just playing a bowl. But unless it's the Rose Bowl, there's one bowl game that I have in mind that I really, really want them to play. And you and I went there back in winter to view the stadium. I want them to play in the first LA Bowl in SoFi Stadium. As a Chargers fan, as someone that loves living in LA, I would love nothing more than UCLA to get the chance to open up that stadium for the college football to really not just a bowl game, Sam. We want a bowl win in LA. Show the city that it is our city. Even if USC is across town, that is our city, and we should win a bowl game in our town.
Oh, absolutely. Really just establish your foothold. I mean, things are obviously different with Corona, but we were talking with Larry Scott back in February about this bowl game, and he was saying that really wants to engage teams, whether it's the visiting or home team, and get them like integrated into LA and kind of give them the whole experience and make a week out of it. And I think that'd be fun. It's not the Rose Bowl, it's not the Cotton Bowl, it's not the college football playoff, but at the very least, it'd be novel. It'd be fun. It's something you can say, like you said, that the UCLA opens up SoFi to college football and wins the first ever LA Bowl. I think that'd be really fun, really entertaining.
Yeah, and as that is usually supposed to be a Pac-12 Mountain West game, maybe we get San Diego State there. You know, we're supposed to play them earlier this season, lost them last year in a pretty rough game, but why not get the rematch there?
I guess we'll have to wait and see. Fingers crossed. Hopefully that matchup can come to fruition along with your Stanford one. But that is just about it today for Bruin Dash. Thank you so much for joining us live, or if you're watching later, thanks for watching a little bit delayed, a little bit late. But if you're looking to follow Jack or I on Twitter, you can follow me at Sam Connon. You can follow Jack at Jack C. Perez. Jack, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Sam. Always a pleasure.
And then if you're looking to see Jack's column on his UCLA football wish list or any other UCLA or Dash Sports TV columns, you can find them at sportspac12.com, and you can follow them at sportspac12 on Twitter. You can find links to those columns on our site, dashsports.tv. And you can follow us on Twitter at dashsportstv. Thank you so much for joining, so much for watching. We'll see you next Monday. Bye-bye.